It is great to see all of you here. We are here for a very important reason. If you have not made a commitment yet, I think you will today. We are here to listen to Amy Klobuchar, Senator Klobuchar, speak from the heart, as always, about what she's going to do as our president. But in the meantime, I have a little job to do, and that is to tell you why I'm voting for her, why I have endorsed her as state representative, and it is because she is the realest person I have met out in the field. I have spent hours and hours, in fact close to 200, with all of the candidates this past summer. And every time I kept coming back to Amy, and I came back to Amy for a reason, because she is real. She speaks from the heart, but she's got grit, and she can take Donald Trump. We needed a president that is honest, that has morals, who has integrity, and that is Amy Klobuchar. Now I am here to ask those of you who have already made the commitment to Amy to do us a favor. One, we need you, the first thing Amy needs from all of you is for you to commit to be a captain at your precinct for Amy. The next thing we need is for those of you, after you listen to her today, for you to sign some commitment to caucus for Amy cards. I believe we have a few people working for Amy here. Would you raise your hands? Anybody here that's working for Amy, we need your hands up for the caucus cards and to talk to them about how you can help Amy out, whether it be phone calls, whether it be door knocking, whether it be being a precinct captain. They will help you out. I will be glad to help you out as well. Now, we have volunteers that are already out there working hard, but we need more. We always need more. Amy is a great candidate, and I hope today, if you haven't made up your mind, that you will make that mind up today. You will commit to Amy, and you will sign up to help make her the winner of the caucuses, but also the first female president. There are a few other people that are going to speak today, and I'm going to be introducing to you. Do we have any West Siders in here? West Siders? Make a little noise because I'm going to introduce you to your Senator, Todd Taylor.
Thank you, Molly. Hello, everybody. It's great to see a lot of folks here tonight. Appreciate everybody coming out in this weather. Apparently it's just going to snow 2 inches in 2 hours, so. But, you know, one of the things that I want to thank you for coming out in this weather is, of course, how you take your responsibility as Iowa caucus goers seriously. We have the First in the Nation caucus, and so I've seen crowds show up at all kinds of events all over the last several months, and that will go on for another month or so before the actual caucus night. So we always have it in the winter, so it's going to be cold. Prepare for that. As you have today as well. We've had Hall of Fame dinners, we've had town hall meetings and debates and these kinds of things, and the crowds are enthusiastic. And I think that's because we have one thing in mind, and that is electing a president, and we're the first in the nation to start that process off. So again, thank you all for being here. Again, I'm Todd Taylor, State Senator for the West Side, and this is my district right here, and so thank you again. When Senator Klobuchar announced that she was running for president, it was in weather like this with the snow coming down. And one of the things that I liked about her, that drew me to her, was how I think of the image of a bridge. In the background of her announcement for president was a bridge that had collapsed because of poor infrastructure. And certainly that makes clear sense. We need infrastructure in this country, and it's a bipartisan issue. And she does also, I would talk about why I like the things that she does as the metaphor of a bridge, is reaching across the aisle to get legislation passed that requires bipartisanship. And that's what we need more of in the Iowa legislature and in the United States Congress, for sure. She has a track record of that. These are some of the reasons why I'm supporting her. So hopefully, if anybody here is undecided, you'll get a chance to ask your question and make up your mind and sign those commit to caucus cards, and we can make that happen. Again, we have about a month left, but in about a week, we'll start the next General Assembly. And everybody, all the desk chairs are the same at the Capitol. But one of the desk chairs that I like is my colleague, Senator Liz Mathis, and I'll bring her up here because she can introduce our next speaker, Senator Mathis.
Thank you, everybody. Wow, it's great to see you here on a Friday at 4:30, right? 4:37, all right? Thank you so much for coming out. Like Todd said, it's reminiscent of the day that Amy announced her candidacy, so we're kind of excited. It's like a good luck charm, right, when the snow is falling. And, so she may come in with a little bit of snow on her hair like she did on the day that she announced. So it's an honor to introduce Senator Amy Klobuchar, who will be the next President of the United States. So like Molly, Representative Molly Donahue, and like Senator Todd Taylor, we have all endorsed, and we will be caucusing for Amy in 31 days. And so we hope that you listen to her tonight and that you will realize that she is the best candidate. She is, let me just tell you a little bit about her. So what does it take to govern? She has shown that over and over and over again. She is a candidate who has experience. We don't need someone in the White House who doesn't have experience. When I was elected in 2011 and got into the Senate, it was kind of a rocky road that first year. And then you kind of figure out, I learned how to govern. And it is hard. Amy makes it look easy. Believe me, it's hard to get a bill through. She has passed, she has authored, she has co-sponsored, she has worked on to the end 100 bills through Congress. All right, that is really hard. That's really hard to do, and you can't do that without good leadership skills. You can't do that without a sense of governing. Here's the other thing, she listens to people. She listens to people and then she takes action. She is solutions-based, she's solutions-oriented. And so, you know, that is one of those things that I look for in a candidate. You know, I mark off all the things that all the candidates are similar, and then I start to look for what are the differences. And her difference is experience, her difference is governing, and her difference is leadership. And that's what we want in the candidate. So, she's been to all of Iowa's 99 counties, right? And she's been to Lynn County several times. We're really excited about that. And hopefully on caucus night in Lynn County, you will be able to caucus for her, for Amy Klobuchar, and make sure that she's viable in your caucus site, in your precinct. So, without any other ado, or with ado, we want to introduce to you Senator Amy Klobuchar, the next President of the United States.
Liz, for that beautiful introduction and for your great leadership. Thank you. All right. Thank you very, very much. And then also I want to thank Todd. Beautiful job. Thank you for your work and all you do for working people. Thank you for that. Molly, who's been with me since the St. Patrick's Day Parade. Where are you, Molly? There she is, very good. And I also know Rob is here, Rob Hogue. Thank you. was way ahead of his time on climate change, and you should all be really proud of the work that he has done. And then also, Swati, where are you? Right over here, thank you. It's great to have her on my side nationally. Everyone comes up to me all the time. Swati told me to come to this. Thank you. Janice Weiner, where are you, Janice? New member of the Iowa City Council. Thank you. And Janice's support means so much. And then I also want to mention our great organizers, Rachel, Kira, Mohammed, and Claire. Thank you very much for all you're doing. All right. So we are in the middle of what someone has called a surge, and we keep going up. And actually, a friend of mine sent a text, and it had an autocorrect by mistake, and it said, "Congratulations on your insurgency." And I'm happy to take those words. That's fine by me. And I think that is what you're seeing all over this state, all over this country. We had our first double-digit national poll yesterday. We are well aware that some of the other candidates are more well-known than me, that they are people that ran for president before. But what I love about the early states, Nevada, where I'm going next, no, not because of the snow. It was planned. And Iowa and South Carolina and New Hampshire, is that the citizens of these states understand that they have this special obligation to make a decision. And I think you all know that the candidate that was always a front runner from the beginning is one that came out of the group getting out of Iowa, and actually not always the one that became the President of the United States. I give to you my great examples of people who have come out of this state strong and gone on to be President: Jimmy Carter, Bill Clinton, and Barack Obama. We are happy about this. Ever since that last debate, we brought in over $1 million in small contributions in 24 hours. We had in there from regular people all over this country. We've been able to double our field offices in Iowa. We've been able to double our staffs in New Hampshire and in other states, and that's what we're doing. And we're doing it the real way, and we're doing it the grassroots way, and there's a reason that my buttons are green. And that because those were the color of Paul Wellstone. Green was the color of one of my mentors, Paul Wellstone, who, if you didn't know about him, I'll tell you one thing, his best friend was Tom Harkin in the U.S. Senate. And Paul was someone that started his campaign where no one expected him to win. And he drove around in this green bus, kind of like what we're doing. And he drove around in the snow, kind of like what we're doing. And one of the funny things he would do is in his ads, because he had so much less money than his millionaire, multimillionaire opponents, he would talk really, really fast, and he would say, "That's how I have to do. I have to talk really fast because I only have 30 seconds and I have to say 3 times as much." And he would also run really fast in all the parades, back and forth and back and forth. Well, in the last year of his life, when he died so tragically early in his 3rd Senate race, he was going to win that race, and he had taken a courageous vote against the Iraq War, which was my position as well, that was not a good thing to do. He took that courageous vote, and he was still going to win that election. But he also that year had to tell the state that he had MS, and he couldn't run back and forth. He was in a lot of pain. And that year, the year that he tragically died way too young, with his wife Sheila in this plane crash, and their daughter, and some trusted members of their staff. That was the year where he would stand on the back of his green bus because he couldn't run back and forth in the parades anymore. And I got to be there because I actually had no opponent in my re-election for county attorney. It sounds really nice right now to have no opponent. I had no opponent, and so I got to be there with him, and I got to see what the magic was, and that is that he would stand on the back of the bus and wave. But there were so many people in these green shirts running around that bus that you didn't even notice he wasn't running himself. Hundreds of people running around that bus. That is grassroots politics. That is politics at its best, when you bring people with you instead of shutting them out. And that is a good way to begin our discussion today. because we have this opportunity right now like we have never seen in this country. We have the opportunity to make very clear to the world, to our fellow citizens, we have the opportunity to make very clear that our country has such a bigger heart than that guy in the White House right now. That we are so much bigger than that. That what unites us is so much bigger than what divides us. And you know there are worthy economic arguments that we're having on that debate stage. And well, we're having them vigorously, that is for sure. And that's good to have. It's good for our party to debate these things. And we're having debates about healthcare and what's the best way to cover people. What's the best way to make it easier to afford college? What do we do about climate change, the existential crisis of our time? We are having those debates in a big, big way. But I don't want you to forget two things. One, what unites us is bigger than what divides us. But the second thing is this. Yes, there is an economic check going on right now. An economic check on this president who has left our farmers and our workers behind. Ask the guy in Crawfordsville at a small plant, a soybean biodiesel plant, who took out a coat rack to show me. And the coat rack, he was the last guy standing in the plant. His job is just to maintain the equipment. And because of the trade war, but mostly because of those big waivers that Donald Trump secretly gave to the oil companies, this guy brings out a coat rack and it has the uniforms of his co-workers that aren't working there anymore. And their names are Mark, they're embroidered on there, Derek, Salvador. And he said, I keep this coat rack, and every uniform was nicely ironed sitting there. So I remember my co-workers. So I remember maybe they can come back. So yeah, it's an economic check on this guy, but it is bigger than that. It is also a decency check. It is a values check. It is a patriotism check. This is a guy that was at the G20 conference, and he's standing next to Vladimir Putin, and someone asked him, a reporter, well, what about Russia's invasion in our election? And he turns to Vladimir Putin, that ruthless dictator, and he makes a joke about it. He makes a joke. Think about this. Hundreds of thousands of Americans, thousands of Iowans have lost their lives standing up for democracies, ours and ones around the world. That's what World War II was about. Think about those 4 little innocent girls at the height of the civil rights movement who lost their lives in that church in Alabama, simply because people were trying to extend that democracy and other people were trying to push back at it so it wouldn't apply to them. So many of the big battles in our country and the big fights and the great moments and the bad moments have been about democracy. And we must and we deserve a president who puts our country and democracy first. Not puts his private interest first, not puts his partisan interest first. We deserve that. So that's what I'm talking about with this patriotism check. But it is also really a values check for some people. And we've got to understand that there are people out there, you know what happened in 2016. Parts of our fired up Democratic base stayed home. And we cannot let that happen again. Some people voted for other people. We have people, though, that were independents and moderate Republicans across the country that stayed home, they voted for other people, or they voted for Donald Trump. I want you to look at this. 31 of Iowa's counties voted for Barack Obama, 31 of your counties, and then voted for Donald Trump. This is what I'm talking about, the rancher in Minnesota. This was my first glimmer of this a few years ago, and he took me on a tour of his cattle ranch on an ATV, and we went in and out of these big cows, and I thought, okay, this is not how I want to die, really? And we're going in and out, and so then finally everyone leaves, and the cattle ranchers leave, and I'm alone with him in his ranch house, and he says to me, we voted for Donald Trump. And I said, what do you mean, the ranchers, your family? He said, no, I mean I don't like to say I, we. He said, we voted for Donald Trump because we were mad about health care. We went in that ballot box, that's what we did. And he said, in the voter box. And he says, then, well, later, he stood in front of that wall, and that was wrong. And I said, well, the wall wasn't really built. He said, no, I mean the CIA wall. He said, the wall of the stars of the anonymous agents, that's a sacred wall. And Donald Trump went there, and the day after the inauguration, he gave an incredibly partisan speech about the size of his crowd. And he did that in front of a wall of the stars of CIA agents who were anonymous, who lost their lives in the line of duty for our country. And this guy said, that was wrong. And then he said, the Boy Scout rally. He said, you know, I was a Boy Scout, and he said Donald Trump gave a political speech in front of a group of young men. He did that. And I can tell you, first of all, my husband was a Boy Scout. Oh, I forgot to introduce him. He's standing right there, right there. John is standing right there, yeah. He was a Boy Scout and from Mankato, Minnesota, and actually there were 6 brothers. He has 5 brothers. And 6 of them, 5 of the 6 became Eagle Scouts. And I don't like to say which one didn't make it because I don't want to embarrass my husband. And he was actually on the debate team, that's why. But anyway, this guy, he says he was a Boy Scout, and he said when he saw Trump give that speech to the Boy Scouts at the Jamboree, he said, that was it. That was it for me. He said, I decided for me, it wasn't patriotic, that I'd done the wrong thing when I went into that voting booth, and this tear comes down his face. That was that guy. Then, in New Hampshire, there was a line of people in a town called Conway, kind of the more rural part of New Hampshire, and there was this line of people, and they all had these little happy stickers. I'm a Supreme Court voter, I'm a climate change voter, I'm a reproductive rights voter, and there's this guy, he's wearing a brown jacket, he's got no sticker. And I said, oh, sir, you don't have a sticker. And he leans forward, he goes, that's because I was a Trump voter. These are my neighbors, and they don't know. So don't say anything right now in front of them. And he said, but you know what? I am not doing it again. So that is what I'm talking about. I do not want us to forget this. And if you think these are just stories I'm telling, I think you know people like this. There may be a few people like this in this room, and I think you also know, look at what just happened in Louisiana, where we re-elected a Democratic governor. Look at what happened in Kentucky, where Mitch McConnell now has a Democratic governor. Look at what happened in the state of Virginia with this incredibly diverse group of candidates. We won and flipped the state house and the state senate. And in those first 2 states, in Louisiana and Kentucky, you know what they have in common? The night before those Democratic governors got elected, guess who went down there and campaigned for their opponents? Donald Trump. So my question is, where can we send him next? That happened. So you know, when you look at those states, that was a big coalition. That was a Big Ten. That was our fired up base, but it was also moderate Republicans and independents. And by the way, if we can win in the state of Kentucky and Louisiana, and when Doug Jones won in Alabama, and Laura Kelly winning in Kansas, you tell me that we cannot win the U.S. Senate seat in the state of Iowa. You can win that Senate seat. We can win that seat. I mean, look at what you did. You sent Abby and Cindy to the U.S. Congress in the last election. You elected Dave and soon to be Rita, and yes, came very close to sending Steve King away from Washington, away from a seat, and this time you will do it and elect JD. You can do that, but only if we understand that we have to bring people with us instead of shutting them out. Only if we put someone at the top of the ticket that gets that we need to have a big tent and a wide coalition and long coattails, and gets that we need to go not just where it's comfortable, but where it's uncomfortable. And yes, I just visited all 99 counties in the state of Iowa. Yeah, I was at a planetarium that they opened especially for me in Cherokee at 11 at night. Okay, that was good. It was actually quite cool. We went everywhere, and we had some Trump people sign home with their MAGA hats, and that was very funny. Because they started to say, well, how are you going to pay for something? Child care. And I said, I'll get to that. And then I waited about 10 minutes. I said, you know how I'm going to pay for things? I went through every single thing. I said, well, we're going to take the capital gains tax, we're going to bring that to the personal rate, that'll bring in hundreds of billions of dollars. We're going to take that corporate tax rate that Donald Trump took from the mid-30s and went down to 21%, and even if we take 4 points of that, we get $400 billion for infrastructure. We can put some into the debt pay down, we can put some into childcare, and I went through the hedge fund loophole, that brings in $18 billion, the oil giveaway brings in $30 billion, and then I ended by saying, and what has your president done for the debt? He has treated you like a bunch of poker chips in one of his bankrupt casinos. So that is what is happening. So I want us to remember that as much as people will be different, we got to answer their questions and make our case. But we have to remember, as much as it is an economic case, it is also a value case, a patriotism case, a decency case. And if you want to have an Iowa example of it, it is right in your state. And that is from the little town of Primgar, Iowa, which was the birthplace of one Joseph Welch. Way before I was born, he was the kid of immigrants. And he grew up without a lot of money, and he rose to become the head lawyer, the counsel for the United States Army. And he had his calling. And that was during the McCarthy hearings, when Joseph McCarthy of Wisconsin, was going after people. He was going after them for their political beliefs. He was going after people that didn't even have the political beliefs that he said they had. He was getting people blacklisted so that they couldn't work. And then he held these hearings so the whole nation could watch him do it. And so many people were afraid of taking him on. They were afraid of taking him on because they thought they would lose their jobs, or their friends would lose their jobs, or their family would lose their jobs. But there was one guy that stood up to him. And that was the Counsel of the United States Army from Primgar, Iowa. And his name was Joseph Welch. And he stood up and he said on national TV to Joseph McCarthy, "Have you no sense of decency, sir? Have you no sense of decency?" That's what this is, this election. It is a decency check. And I am going to be a juror next week in this trial. And by the way, to give you an update on that, there's a lot of updates to give you today on many things that are happening. But to give you an update on that, we are still wrangling for good reason over how that trial is going to go. Because Donald Trump claims that he's going to be exonerated. Well, then why is he afraid to call all the president's men to come to testify? We are simply looking for 4 witnesses. His acting chief of staff, who many sources under oath said ordered that the aid be withheld to this fledgling democracy of Ukraine, who he had called, the president had called to ask for a favor for, to look for dirt on a political opponent. We want to hear from Mr. Bolton, who had a lot of information. People testified that he told his own staff to go see a lawyer after they met with the president, and 2 people named Blair and Duffy. We just found out this weekend that Mr. Duffy had sent an email that came out on a Freedom of Information request that actually said POTUS, P-O-T-U-S, the President of the United States, has said to hold this aid under his orders. Smoking gun. But we have not been able to question that witness. So that is what's going on as we try to get a fair hearing so the American public can have their due and to listen to what these witnesses says. That's what's happening right now. So during that time, I'm going to be a juror. There's going to be 100 jurors. But you're going to be a juror in the other way. You're going to be a juror to decide which candidate should be leading our ticket and who can best beat Donald Trump. And that is a very important role that you play. And so I may not be able to be here every day. That's one of the reasons I'm here right now. That's the reason I did 27 counties in 10 days. No, 3 days, 3.5 days. Yeah, we did that, I forgot. Yeah, 3.5 days. And did 7 town halls in New Hampshire, including on New Year's Eve at 5 p.m., in which I at least got to say to them, as I'll say to you, to fill out those caucus cards, commit to caucus. I said to them in New Hampshire, come on, you can fill out those commit to vote cards. I mean, it's New Year's Eve. You won't remember what you do the next day anyway. So anyway, we did that. We have gone everywhere because I know that, I may not be able to be here as much, but John will be here. My daughter will be here. These incredible surrogates, look at them in the front row, will be here for me. Someone asked the other day, well, some people are, oops, we lost this thing. We got it. teacher voice. So anyway, someone asked me, well, what about the celebrities? What celebrities are you going to be? I go, what do you mean, celebrities? I have a cultural icon. I have the mayor of Fertile, Iowa. So while we are doing that, I am going to need you to do your jobs, and that is to make this decision. And to me, that means a lot of things. It means talking to your neighbors and friends about the candidates. Not all of us have $1 billion that we're going to be able to spend on political acts. That is true. And, oops. Okay. Is it working? Should I get my Okay, very good. No, I don't. Okay. So anyway, so that is what I need you to do, because we're not all in the same boat in this race. But our campaign is the real campaign. Our campaign is doing this the right way. And when you talk to your friends, these are a few of the things I want you to talk about. First of all, I have been to these states that we lost in 2016. States like Pennsylvania, where we lost, which was a shock to everyone. We came back, roaring back, of course, by winning the governorship and that Senate seat in Pennsylvania. Michigan, I've talked to dock workers there. Wisconsin, I've talked to dairy farmers there. And Ohio, Iowa, when you think of these states, our plan is this. We are going to build a big, blue, beautiful wall around the Midwest. And we are going to make Donald Trump pay for it, okay? When you talk to your friends and neighbors, and maybe people who aren't sure what they're going to do in this thing, I think you got to remind them of this. A lot of times we talk about Donald Trump as a bully. He is that. But I also want you to remember that he hasn't kept his promises to the people. I use the example of our rural communities and what's happened. But it is more than that. He said he would bring pharmaceutical costs down. He hasn't done that. He said he would deliver big time on infrastructure. You've seen levees bursting in Iowa. You have not seen the work that we need to see on our roads and bridges, on our locks and dams, on our what? Oh, she's taking a call. I thought she had it. It's Friday afternoon. Yeah, that's good, but just have them sign one of those commit to caucus cards. On our rural broadband, you know, we have not seen the kind of work that we need to be done. It has not happened. So yeah, you tell them that, but remember, for them, he has not fulfilled his promises. And instead of a bully, think about it a different way. When people, regular people, get confronted with things, when your union workers get confronted with things, what do? They got to just take another job. They've got to go, or their spouse has to take another job. They got to find a way to make ends meet. What does this guy do, who lives in the best house in the country, who has the best job, who came in there with $413 million from his dad during the course of his career? By the way, I cannot wait to say to him on the debate stage, first of all, Midwest, it's not flyover country to me. I live here. Secondly, you got $413 million from your dad. My life started when my grandpa saved money in a coffee can in the basement to send my dad to community college, to a 2-year community college. My grandpa worked that job. He was the oldest of 9 kids. He had to help raise them when his parents died, and then he had to raise with my grandma his 2 boys. And he saved money in a coffee can. That was my family trust. And you do not fit $413 million in a coffee can. You do not do that. And when you are given opportunity from a teacher, from someone that you work with, from a parent, from a grandparent, from a neighbor, you go into the world not with a sense of entitlement. You go into the world with a sense of obligation. An obligation to lift others up, not hoard it for yourself. An obligation to help other people, not slam them down. So when I talk to people, these workers out there that are working hard, what I hear from them is they think this, you know, we have to work really hard when things go wrong for us. When things go wrong for him, much of it's self-imposed because of his trade war and other things. What does he do? He blames other people. That's what he do. He whines about it. He blames, one of my favorites, he blames the head of the Federal Reserve. He appointed that guy. So he blames him. He blames Barack Obama. That's another one of his favorites. He blames the entire city of Baltimore. He does that all the time. He blames the entire country of Denmark. Who does that? That's what he does. And when he is at a NATO conference and world leaders are caught on tape making fun of him, that happens all the time. I will say in the US Senate, I have seen senators say worse things than that about senators. Even people they like. They're like, oh, he's doing a press conference. It was not that bad. But what does this guy do? He is so thin-skinned that he walks. They are still doing important things at that conference. He is our commander-in-chief, and he walks. America doesn't quit. And we deserve better. I see Janice, and she knows what I'm talking about. Our hardworking employees at the State Department, that's what she did. Our hardworking employees at the State Department, they need better than a whiner. They need better than a quitter. And so does our military. They deserve better than that. And by the way, the other news of this week, as you know, is what happened yesterday. This is a major, major, major event. When Soleimani, who, by the way, was a bad guy. He was someone who killed many, many people. He was a sponsor of terrorism. He ordered attacks on people in Iraq, in Syria, in many places. But still, like so many of you, I have many, many concerns and questions about what happened here. Because these repercussions, they are huge. You already have troops being sent over there. You already, even before this happened, as Janice knows, they were bringing home people from the State Department, hollowing out our presence in Iraq. They already have told Americans that they have to leave there. It's a completely chaotic situation, which is the way you know that Donald Trump does business. It is not thought out. It is not thought out. And then the final thing, when you are thinking things out, and when you are doing things that are smart for peace, and you are putting your country first, and you are putting the lives of people around the world first, wouldn't you talk to the leaders of the United States Congress? That's what you're supposed to do. You know what he did instead? He didn't talk to them. It's called the Gang of Eight. It's the leaders of the Senate and the House and the Democrat and Republican side. He did not talk to them. He did not seek their counsel and advice. Instead, you know what he did? He talked to Lindsey Graham because they were on a golf trip together. That's what he did. So, of course, our first concern is for our personnel that is over there, Americans that are over there, aid workers that are over there, people who are over there from our own military. That is our number one concern. But our second, and I just found out we will have a briefing. I demanded a briefing. We must find out what happened so that we can bring our own views to bear on this situation. But the other thing that we know is that this is part of a pattern. He is someone that makes these decisions sometimes in his bathroom at 4 in the morning, in his bathrobe doing tweets. He's the one that invited the Taliban to Camp David when in fact there had been an agreement that we've long sought after in Afghanistan that didn't happen. He's someone that precipitously removes 150 troops from the border with Syria, allowing the Turks to come in, something he knew what would happen. All of this was predicted. Leaving the Kurds for slaughter, the Kurds who had already lost 11,000 people fighting by our side, and then of course giving Iran a bigger stronghold once again in Syria. These are major decisions affecting people every day, and we need a commander-in-chief who is going to make decisions based on good advice from the military. Good advice from people that surround her that are not all a bunch of sycophants, which is what he has. Someone who has grace under pressure, if you saw me in the Kavanaugh hearing, who has, or on the debate stage, who is able to be tough enough to make these decisions, but make decisions with the facts and make decisions from her heart. So that is one of the main things that we have to think about here when we think about our foreign policy. But it is also about more than that. It is a positive economic agenda for this country, something that has really eluded him. And I'm talking here about shared prosperity. I'm talking about things like healthcare. think of what he's done since he's gone in. He's sabotaged the Affordable Care Act. So when I look at this, and I know we had a very vigorous debate up there on the stage, I look at it and say, what is the best way we can help people? And when you come to a river, and we got a lot of lakes and rivers in Minnesota, land of 10,000 lakes. I've always thought that if you want to cross over that water, you build a bridge. You don't blow one up. And our first practical thing to keep in mind is that the Affordable Care Act is now 10 points more popular than the President of the United States. So we should be building on this. We should be building on this instead of blowing it up. And so what that means to me is, first of all, making premiums less expensive with a nonprofit public option. That was what Barack Obama wanted to do from the very beginning. Number two, doing something about pharma prices. Pharmaceutical prices are out of control, and I have led on this since I got to the U.S. Senate. And I know we can get this done. Why? Because I know where the votes are. In fact, the Klobuchar-Sanders amendment that we put forward one night at about midnight got 14 Republican votes to bring in less expensive drugs from Canada. Now, I'm not sure they knew what they were voting on at midnight, but we got 14 Republican votes. Then Senator Grassley went on to sponsor with me after we lost my friend Senator McCain. Senator Grassley stepped in his shoes, and he is now the lead Republican with me on the bill to bring in less expensive drugs from other countries. And the best thing that I learned is that you don't need Congress to get this done. A president can do this herself. You just simply ask for a waiver and you can bring in those less expensive drugs. This is one of the things you can do, and I have found 137 things that a president can do herself in the first 100 days without Congress. And they are all legal. They are all legal. And that is how you build trust with the people, because you're actually getting things done. I lead the bill to unleash the power of 43 million seniors to get better prices under Medicare. Right now, pharma put into law a provision that says that you can't negotiate. That is in law. Medicaid can negotiate, the VA can negotiate, but Medicare can't negotiate. I have 34 co-sponsors on that bill. As president, I can get it done. We can put a cap by tying the international average on the price of pharmaceuticals. You can put a cap on pharmaceuticals. That is a bill right now in the House. It would save, ready for this, $350 billion in 10 years. 354 taxpayers. These are actual proposals. Nothing has happened. That's how you build on Obamacare. What else do you do? Addiction and mental health. I was the first candidate in this race to come out with a full-blown proposal for how we pay for and what we do when it comes to mental health and addiction. This is personal for me. Growing up, my dad struggled with alcoholism. By the time John and I got married, he actually had 3 DWIs. And at that point, the judge said to him, okay, you got to choose jail or treatment. And he chose treatment. And in his words, he was pursued by grace because of his family and his treatment and his faith and his friends. He's been sober ever since. And I think everyone should have that same right. And that means using this money that's going to be coming in big time from those opioid manufacturers, who we now know by email said things like to the other pharma executives, keep pumping them out. They're eating them like Doritos. You talk about a smoking gun piece of evidence. We have that. So there's going to be a huge settlement, kind of like tobacco. And a president, if you have a president that understands the law and how to get these things done, worked in the private sector for 14 years, we can get a settlement that works. A settlement that will go out to the people that need it, that can also include, by the way, other forms of addiction and things like mental health. And by the way, the end of my dad's story is still a good one. He is 91. He's still sober. We just visited him for Christmas last week. He's in assisted living. His AA group still visits him there. And he told me about a year ago or so, you know, it's hard to get a drink around here anyway. Everyone should have the same right to have that story. Mental health here in Iowa, huge. You only have 64 public mental health beds in the state of Iowa. only 64. And if we do this in a big way, we're going to be able to get that funding for that, for school counselors. I was in Wapello, and a school counselor just got off work. She told me that day in that high school with 650 kids, she had 4 kids come up to her and talk about suicide, thoughts of suicide. They were all 4 immigrant kids. They all 4 had parents that worked at the plant. This is, of course, a result of bad policy by this administration when it comes to immigration. And I believe, by the way, immigrants don't diminish America. They are America. And we can move on comprehensive reform. But it's also about making sure we get those resources out for counseling, for mental health parity, for those mental health vets. We can do this, but not with the guy in the White House. Big elephant in the room, long-term care. Instead of relitigating either in our own party or with Donald Trump, the Affordable Care Act, what we should be doing is talking about long-term care. Long-term care, we are going to have a doubling of our senior population in the next few decades. I used to call it the silver tsunami, and then AARP told me that was too negative, so now I call it the silver surge. And we are talking about people, many of whom, by the way, are seniors who want to work, they want to volunteer. We should make that easier. We need their help. We have people who have Alzheimer's. We're going to have, by 2050, 14 million Americans having the most expensive disease that there is. We should do more to shore up Social Security, make our pensions strong. Social Security, by the way, all you have to do, this is a really elegant solution. The payroll tax ends at $133,000. That's where we stop paying in. You could maybe move it up to $250,000. You could have a donut hole if you want. Even if you started at $250,000 and above, again, you have enough money to keep it going into perpetuity. Right now, by 2034, it's going to start paying out 10 to 15% less. We can fix that all with that fix, and the public would be overwhelmingly for it. Then finally, long-term care. So that means things like long-term care insurance. In my dad's case, for some reason, he got long-term care insurance. It's so good. That's what's helping him to stay in this house with 15 other people. He's got about 1.5 years left on it. Then you go into savings. He doesn't have much. He got married for 3 years. Whole nother story. Married 3 times. 3 times. He got married 3 times. Not for 3 years. Well, one was for. But he got married 3 times. 3 times. And so he doesn't have much savings. But what he's got is that long-term care insurance. And then it'll kick into Medicaid. And I've already talked to Catholic Charities. They'll take him in then because Medicaid, they don't take Medicaid where he is now. Our story is actually better than a lot of family stories that don't have that long-term care insurance. And so I want to make it easier. And this isn't just about seniors. There are a lot of people out there that know what it's like. They're taking care of their own kids and also helping their aging parents. So this is also about really everyone and making sure it's easier to get long-term care insurance if you want to do that, or it's easier to pay for long-term care. How would I do this? Well, first of all, let's make it easier for people to stay in their homes that want to. Let's do more with senior housing and housing in general. And also, when it comes to, thank you, 2 people. Let us do something about long-term care. This guy, I got this idea from a wealthy guy in Boston. And he told me this. He said a lot of wealthy people set up trust funds for their kids. Okay, that's great. And he said, just if you even take the ones that are more than $500,000 and you start taxing, not the trust fund itself, but the appreciation. That means the gain that they make each year. If you tax that, just that, let's do it at the capital gains rate, which I want to make the personal rate much closer. You bring in on taxing those long-term gains on those trust funds, you bring in over $100 billion. Billion dollars. Not million, $billion. So imagine how much that would help people to either afford long-term care once they're in there or premiums. Those are the kinds of creative solutions that I'm talking about here. Okay, other challenges. I mentioned immigration reform. We can do this with comprehensive immigration reform. Workforce training. I think we have to match our education system with our economy. That means, number 1, firing Betsy DeVos. That means number 2, investing in K through 12 in a big way, and we can do this. That's where that capital gains rate, you can pay for it that way. Number 3, that means making sure we look at what are the fastest growing jobs in America. We're going to have over 1 million openings that we can't fill right now for home health care workers. So So let's make sure that people have child care and retirement, things like that, so they actually take those jobs. We're gonna have over 100,000 openings for nursing assistants that require 1- and 2-year degrees. We are gonna have over 70,000 openings for electricians that we don't know how we're gonna fill right now. We do not have a shortage of MBAs in this country. We have a shortage of plumbers. We have a shortage of plumbers. That's right. That's probably someone that's trying to hire a plumber out there. We have a shortage of plumbers. So the idea is making sure that those degrees for the jobs we need, especially the 1- and 2-year degrees, are free. For the 4-year degrees, a lot of these jobs are 4-year degrees, you double the Pell Grants, because that can be used in a public or private colleges. You go from $6,000 to $12,000 a year. You have it apply to people that make up to $100,000 instead of just $50,000. That way you're putting the money to help the people that need the help, and you're not using the money to help pay wealthy kids go to college. I just think that makes the most sense. I know it doesn't fit on a bumper sticker, I'm working that out. But it is the best policy way to get at this. Climate change. Rob Ho, climate change. Leaving the most important thing for last, and that is because we've got to start making not just the moral argument, not just the environmental argument, but the economic argument for doing this now. This is not something that we can wait a century to get at. You know why? It's not just the rising sea levels that we're seeing on the coast, what's happening in Florida and Norfolk, Virginia. It is not even just the horrible wildfires we just saw in California. It is also what we're seeing right here in Iowa. We are seeing in the nation a 50% increase in homeowners insurance. That is going to get worse. Ask any of your insurance agents what's happening because of climate change. We are seeing flooding like we've never seen before. Farmers are having trouble planting or harvesting. It is affecting the economy right here. We have levees that are bursting in eastern and western Iowa. It is the binoculars of a friend of mine named Fran, near the Nebraska border, Pacific Junction. She showed me through those binoculars, she showed me her house. And she said, that's my house, I bought it with my husband, lived there with our 4-year-olds. I wanted to retire in that house. But now it's covered, the first floor in water. The kitchen's covered, and I love the kitchen. It's my favorite room. I love the way the light comes in the windows. And she said, and then the house, it is so sturdy. It has been there through nearly 100 years. There's horsehair in the plaster. Then I said, is this a river? There's raging water. Fran, is this it? Because you bought your house on a river. She said, no, that's the road. The river is 2.5 miles away. She said the water's not even come close to this neighborhood before. That is climate change. So I can tell you we can do this, and we can do it the right way. And because we have to make sure to get the votes to do it, that the money that we bring in by pricing carbon that we're going to have to do to create the incentives to get things done, that goes back to the people that are going to, including in this room. There's going to be changes with the heating bills and things like that, and we cannot do this unless we put that money back into that. But let me tell you why you set those standards on carbon. You set those standards on carbon because that's the way you're going to get the technology and the investment to make this happen and to reduce the CO2. And if you don't believe me, you are Iowa. You gave the world Norman Borlaug. He saw a problem, and he developed the technology and the ideas to feed 1 billion people in the world. That's why I see this as an opportunity. You look at wind in your state, you look at wind manufacturing, you look at what the farmers can do, whether it's planting winter crops or the like, to be part of this. This is going to be an all-out effort. And in addition to those big long-term things, we can do things right away. I mentioned the International Climate Change Agreement. Syria and Nicaragua were the only countries not in it. They are now they also got in it. We are the only country that's not in it. On day 1, we will get in it. On day 2, we will bring back the clean power rules that the Obama administration had worked out over years, that everyone expected to have happened. And on day 3, we will bring back the gas mileage standards that all the car companies had signed on to. And then Trump came in and said, no, you don't have to. Ford still tried to do that. They wanted to do the gas mileage standard. They were doing it in California, and then he threatened them with antitrust violations. That is what we're talking about when we're talking about climate change. So all of these things are in front of us. But none of these things can we do unless we win big. So that is my closing argument. We have to win big. And you heard Liz talk about how I have won in all these districts. I have won every single time in that red district that borders Iowa. Not just by a little, but by a lot. I have won in the district, the congressional districts, every single time that borders North and South Dakota. I have won in northern Minnesota, a Republican-held district where the steelworkers are. And yes, I have won Michelle Bachmann's district every single time. And I have not done it by selling out. I have simply done it by looking people in the eye and telling them the truth, by saying to them, if you are tired of this noise and nonsense and you want to get things done, you have a home with me. That is what this is about. So I just want to thank you for turning out in such a big way. You know, this is it. We are just like, 30 days away. And I know you guys always like to say, you're in my top 3, you're in my top 2. Just go for it. Go for it. It is a new year. It is a new year. My favorite story came right out of this town when I met with Kay, your former mayor. And she said to me after a long breakfast, I am 78% with you, good news. And I go, okay, that is good news, I guess. But then she came around and she is now 100% with me. You can do that too. That's what we want you to do. But mostly, thank you for being the guardians of our democracy. I'll end with this story and then take some questions. John and I were at church on Christmas Eve, and we were there with our daughter, and I was remembering back, as you may do, families do as they think back, see that nativity play, and I was remembering when our daughter was only 4, and she was in that play, and she was to play the angel, and we were sitting out in the pews, and she would not go out to practice, and I said, why won't you go out there? And she said, because I want to be the donkey. And I said, no, Timmy and Joey are the donkey, these hot teenage boys in this costume. And she said, well, I want to be Mary. And I said, no, Mary is 14. I said, I don't understand. You have the coolest part in this whole thing. You are the angel. You get to go out at the end and spread your wings. She finally said, Mom, she looked way to the top of the church, I don't know how to tell them. I don't know how to fly. And I said to her that day, you know what, honey? Not all angels fly. You are truly the angels of our democracy, the guardian angels. You are helping people that maybe have never met you and maybe never will. But you are giving them the wings to fly. You get that there is a mission, as my friend John McCain would always say. There is nothing more liberating than fighting for a cause larger than yourself. That is what this is about. This is about being the guardians, yes, of our economy, yes, for our people, yes, for our kids, but you are the guardians of our very democracy. Somehow, some way, someone has passed those wings to you. So I want you to sign on with us, but mostly I want you to keep being involved. I want you to lead the way, and I want us to win this election. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Okay, this is very good. This is from Justine. Where are you, Justine? From Perry. Where did you go, Justine? Feels like a song. Oh, you're over there. Okay, so I'll ask this one. You could ask it too if you want. But really 2 questions. What is your plan to lower the cost of child care? This is a really important thing. It's important for families, including ones right in this room, but it is also important for our country's economy. Like Iowa, like Minnesota, like so many states, we want people to work if they want to work. And for a lot of people, it is really hard to do. And it's hard to do because maybe they have a sick parent or they have someone with disabilities in their family, and that's why we want to be able to have that work-family leave. But it's also hard for them to do because they can't afford childcare. Or in some areas of Iowa, there actually isn't childcare. They're called childcare deserts. So there's a really good solution on the table, and it's something my friend Patty Murray's worked on, and I've long been on this bill, and as president I can get it done. And that is this. It's the idea that you take, okay, if you make up to, say, 150% above the median family income, that will include a lot of people, right? So if you are there with your income, then you should be able to, if you spend more than 7% of your money on child care, you should be able to get some help over the 7%. And what this will do, and they've studied this and showed how this will help, and this, of course, some people are going to get more help when they have less money, we know that. But for a whole group of people that are in the middle, it's really hard for them to pay for childcare. And so the idea here is that once you do that, it'll help people to afford childcare, but more than that, it's going to help create childcare, because people are going to know they have a steadier flow of kids coming in, because people will know how they can budget for childcare. And then you have creative things we can do to make for childcare with grants and how we're going to patch things together. I've seen some incredible examples in high schools where actually the city and the state, and this is in my own state, of businesses came together and used some space in a high school, and then the high school kids actually volunteer during the day. They can work there after school. They're not the only ones working there, don't worry. So there's an example. Or small businesses can pool their employees and pool their resources and use one small business to have the child care center. But we just have to do better. And we can do this. We can. The president, remember Ivanka, the whole thing, talking a big game on that. I remember the pink dress, the whole thing. Well, the truth is, their idea would have taken from Social Security. That was how they were going to do this. They were going to have people borrow against their own Social Security. We can do better than this, and I have the exact pay for how we can do this. Okay, number 2, the question was on LGBTQ families, that's a very good question. We don't always get it at every event, so thank you. So for me, this starts with making sure what we have done, and Iowa was such a great example, and that is that you were one of the first states in the country that allowed for same-sex marriage. That was an amazing thing. And I remember when we had the big fight in Minnesota, people would always say, well, Iowa has it. Come on, you guys. And we were able to do some incredible activists in our state to defeat a very mean-spirited amendment that was on the ballot in Minnesota. And from there, the Supreme Court case and the like. Other things. The one big pending issue right now for families, for LGBTQ, is the Equality Act. And this simple idea, right now in this country, you can get legally married in one state if you're gay, and then the next day you can be fired from your job for being gay. Because not every state has protections like my state has when it comes to working and for the trans community and the like. So this is really important. It's a bill pending in Congress. The other things we can do. In my first 100 days, you can do this without Congress. I will lift the ban on our patriotic trans members of our society serving in the military. That is all. We can stop the stigma and all of the things and the bullying and go into this in a much bigger way. Betsy DeVos has done all kinds of bad things in this area that we can change simply by firing her. So there's just a lot of very good things we can do. And then, of course, enforcement of our hate crimes laws. And we know this is not only our LGBTQ community that has had horrid experiences with this, it is also African Americans, it is also our Jewish community, our Muslim community. The rhetoric and the hate has bled into more hate crimes. Look at what just happened in the rabbi's house in New York, the stabbing during a Hanukkah celebration, the mosque in Minnesota that was bombed. And I have been involved in this from way back in my first elected office as county attorney. I actually made a priority out of hate crimes prosecution. We went after a guy who actually took a 2x4 and hit a guy over the head for speaking Spanish. The foreman did that on that plant floor. Yep, we prosecuted him. We prosecuted another guy who said he was going to go out and kill a black kid on Martin Luther King Day. He shot him. Thankfully, he didn't kill him, but that happened, and we prosecuted that case. So because of all this, when Bill Clinton actually rolled out the Matthew Shepard hate crimes bill, remember that? To cover LGBTQ, that horrible story of that young man found, the passerby thought he was a scarecrow on a fence post. I got invited to the White House when Bill Clinton rolled that bill out, and I got to meet with Matthew Shepard's family. I got to meet the investigators on the case, and at the very last minute, this is a little tangential story, but an interesting one, they invited me to introduce President Clinton at the White House. Now, for this big event. I actually had never even been in the White House, not even on a tour before. And there I was with very little notice, ready to go, standing outside of the door with Bill Clinton on one side and Janet Reno and Eric Holder, her deputy, on the other. They're all really tall. And I had my notes, and I'm ready to go into this whole room full of people and media, and the military band there was there, and they wanted to have a very formal occasion. This is all a true story, Bill Clinton remembers it. And they started playing, you know, do, 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 Hail to the Chief. And I start walking in with my notes, and all of a sudden I feel this big hand on my shoulder, and this voice says, I know you're gonna do great out there, but when they play that song, I usually go first. That is a true story. So, that may have been my first visit to the White House, but it will not be my last. Let's see. Grant asks, how will you, Grant from Marion, is that right? I think so. Where are you, Grant?
Right here.
Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. He asks, how will you balance the recovery of our international standing in parallel with repair of the domestic damage inflicted by Trump? Just a softball. Thank you there. So I think I just answered this one. Yep. So I think first of all that we have to do two things at once. I'm a mom. I can do that. And you're going to see this in that. You will see this at my best in the next month. And so I think that what you have to do is really set out these clear goals for your friends and your enemies to make them know what you're going to do. And that means that that plan that I put forward, I've gotten a lot of people very interested in that plan, including some of my fellow candidates that are running have talked to me about it. They think it's a good idea. So we have that. Secondly, there are so many things you can do on your own and that you can do with Congress. You really lay out those things, the priorities of getting climate change legislation done, immigration reform, and a number of these economic priorities that we talked about today. And then in those first 100 days, I've committed to visit with our major allies to the north and the south. I think we should also go, and I will, visit with our European allies. I think that there are strong connections that President Obama had made in Africa that we must continue because there's a big market out there for us for trading our goods that's developing in Africa, in India, the work that we can do when it comes to Asia, and China, of course, is a bad actor here. They have been stealing our intellectual property. They have been subsidizing industries. But the best way you get at this is not by, there's an old saying in foreign policy, keep your threats and keep your promises. And this president does neither. And so they've been watching that. So it's going to be very important to have clear intentions with our allies, up the trade enforcement, work with our main trading partners here, which is, of course, Canada and Mexico. We are stronger as a trading bloc. And there is so much we can do here. But you're right, it's going to be very important that we come out of this again as the beacon of democracy. There's a lot of people that are just waiting through these 4 years of Donald Trump around the world that may want to do business with us, that have issues that they want to work with us on. But he has basically shut them out. And I think that David Brooks, the columnist, once said it best when he talked about Barack Obama, you don't know what you've got till it's gone. And that sense of dignity and decency is about kids watching their president on TV and their parents not muting the volume, but it is also about the world and our standing in the world. So we will do both things at once. Here, Stance on Guns, that is from Barbara in Cedar Rapids. So there you go, Barbara, thank you. So, I look at all these like I think a lot of people in Iowa do. We're in 2 states that are strong hunting states, but we also believe in people's safety. And so when I look at these things, I say, did they hurt my Uncle Dick in the deer stand? Does universal background checks or magazine limits or any of these things, assault weapon ban, and no, they do not hurt my Uncle Dick in the deer stand. And I have made this point to the President of the United States, because I was the one that sat across from him after Parkland, and made the case for universal background checks. And he said 9 times, I have the piece of paper with the hash marks, he made those promises. But he said, yes, it's a video, there's a video of this. And he said to me, yeah, we'll do that, and we'll also close the boyfriend loophole. That was my bill, and is still, by the way, out there, which I'll talk about in a minute. And he said, yeah, he'd do it. And then the next day, he met with the NRA, and he folded. So this has been my journey. When I was in law enforcement, we tried to get the assault weapon ban reauthorized. The police chiefs couldn't do it. We couldn't get it done. I got to the Senate, and I saw those parents after Sandy Hook. They were simply trying to do some really important things. They were trying to make sure that we passed universal background checks, and they were unable to do it. They were unable to do it because the Senate didn't have the courage to get it done. And I remember having one of the moms in my office, and she said, you know, my son, he was in that school, and he was autistic, and the last day when I kissed him goodbye, he couldn't speak. He pointed to the picture of his school aide that he loved very much on the refrigerator. That's what he did every day. Hours later, she said she's in the fire station. One by one, the kids come back, and pretty soon she knows she's never going to see her little boy again. And she, as she's sobbing, has this momentary thought where she thinks about that school aide, because she knew that woman would never leave his side. And when they found the 2 of them shot dead, that woman had her arms around that little boy. That mom had the courage to come to advocate for background checks that wouldn't have saved her kid, but that she knew would save lives, because it's the #1 thing to do with suicides and with domestic violence homicide. But the Senate didn't have the courage to get it done. Then what happens? Parkland. Those kids stood up in Florida, and something changed. Kids all across the country, especially boys, started talking to their dads and their grandpas. They said, we love hunting too. We go out hunting, but why can't we have universal background checks? Why can't we have these magazine limits? And pretty soon things shifted. 1, those kids voted big time in the midterm elections, including here in this state. 2, when their parents voted, they had a little different mindset. And that is how you send people like Abby and Cindy to Congress. They voted the right way. What happened? It was democracy in action. We passed universal background checks. We passed closing the Charleston loophole, and we passed my bill to say that people who are convicted of domestic abuse cannot go out and get AK-47s. That bill passed with Republican support. So what has happened now? Those bills are sitting where? They're sitting on Mitch McConnell's desk along with 400 other bills, leading me back to the very beginning of our whole argument, that we need to win big. Because if we want to get these things done, and don't tell me we can't do it. You did it here in the midterm with those 2 congressional races. You did it, and they did it in our neighbors there in Wisconsin, where someone had a Green Bay Packers shirt on. Someone, very hard for me, very hard for me. But when they did it with 4 words, former Governor Scott Walker, right? We have done this, but we can only do it if we win big. So I ask for your support. We're going to win this. We're going to get it done, but only with you at my side. Thank you, everyone. Let's go. Let's win. Get this done. Thank you. Thank you, Cedar Rapids.
Thank you so much. We're going to do a photo line here in the corner. If you could line up against this wall. The senator does have a flight to catch, so we appreciate your cooperation today.
When that kid up here will come down to you. Thanks.